Good morning. I think we're working again. Hope we're working again. The cinemas are back open in Hong Kong this week. So I've actually been twice. I was last night. I went to see Tenet, the press screening for Tenet last night, and a Japanese film called Last Letter, which I'll talk about in a moment. First, a couple words about Tenet. I'll talk about it next week because it's opening next week. Um, but I'll probably post my review online, my written review online on my website, excuse me, in the next few days. I need to think about it. It's my website's howard4film.com, howardforfilm.com, so you can check it out there. But I'll just say, if you go to see Tenet, a bit of advice: see it on a big screen. It needs to be seen on a big screen, which makes sense because Christopher Nolan, the director, didn't want it to go to the streaming service, and it's very clear why. Yeah, it needs a big screen. I saw it in IMAX. Doesn't necessarily need IMAX, but a big widescreen is good. And don't sit close because there's a lot of action, and so I sat in row F, which was a little like I was sort of like that, bit close. So I'd say sit further back if you can. Um, as for the film, I'll just say it's loud. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's loud, and hopefully, my film came with Chinese subtitles, and I had to read them every once in a while because I couldn't hear what they were saying. And I know this is a lot of people have complained about this. People who have seen the film have complained. There is so much background noise, music, whatever. You can't, and there's a lot of expositions. People are explaining, characters are explaining what's happening. You can't hear what they're saying. So I was like reading the Chinese subtitles to hear what they were saying. Um, so yeah, so I'll talk more about it next week. Anyhow, the other one of the films that's open. There's another film that is opening here today, but I haven't seen it, called the New Mutants. It's the X film kids, X Men kids film that was supposedly going to start a whole new X Men franchise, reboot, whatever. It won't. This film has been on hold for ages, and then of course it was delayed because of the coronavirus, and yeah, I look, friends of mine have seen it. They've said it's not as horrible as everybody thought it would be. I don't know if that's a good recommendation to go see it. I just not interested in going to see it. Look, the film. I think they filmed it 3-4 years ago already, and it's only coming out now. So whatever. Okay, so another film that opened yesterday here in Hong Kong is called Last Letter, or in Japanese called Restoreta. Truly, that's what it's called in Japanese. They didn't. They used katakana in the title. This is a new film by Shunjo Iwai, who's a Japanese director, filmmaker. He does a lot of other things, very multi-talented guy. And he did another film 2 years ago by the same name, called Last Letter, which was set in China with Chinese actors. This one's the same film, but with Japanese actors, set in Japan. So it's very interesting. There aren't too many directors who've had the opportunity, or perhaps it's just the desire to make their own remakes. Alfred Hitchcock did it with The Man Who Knew Too Much. He did it the first time in 1934, and then he did it again in 1956. But he made some changes to it. He nearly doubled the film's running time. He shifted one of the locations in the film. He tweaked a few other details. And of course, he shot the remake in color. The original was in black and white. And the consensus is that while his first film was pretty good, the second one was much better. Now, Cecil B. DeMille also did it with the Ten Commandments. First in 1923, it was a silent film. And in 1956, of course, with Charlton Heston. And like Hitchcock, DeMille also, he wanted to take advantage of the technology that wasn't available the first time around. And in fact, both films were shot in something called VistaVision, which was introduced 2 years earlier in 1954. I don't think VistaVision is used anymore because there's newer technologies. But at the time, it was it was a big thing, and it was a very expensive process, which is probably why it's not used anymore. Now, with Hitchcock's remake, the 1956 version of the Ten Commandments came in at a whopping 84 minutes longer than the original. But I think everybody would agree that the remake is the better film. And those are just two examples. There are a few more examples of directors who've made their own films. But so here's two where the directors did make, I would say, pretty good changes to the film. In this one, Last Letter, there's not a lot that's different. Other than you got, okay, the language is different, the setting is different, there's a couple minor details that are different, but pretty much it's the same film, almost word for word, actually. Now, so you have to wonder why bother doing this again unless you're going to make substantive changes to it. And I honestly don't know the answer to it. My guess is that when he wrote the script, he wrote the screenplay in 2017, I guess 3 years ago, and he was shopping it around for funding to make the film. Perhaps, I'm just guessing, perhaps Chinese money came first, and one of the strings attached was you got to make it in China with Chinese actors. So he wanted to get the film made, and he did in China. After that, Japanese funders came in, and he said, "Oh, okay, I'll just do the same thing in Japan." I honestly don't know. That's my guess. But I think personally, I think it's disappointing that he didn't really make substantive changes to the film. So if you've seen one, you don't need to see. If you've seen the first one, you don't need to see this one. But if you haven't, here's what it's about. You have Yuri Kishibeno, who's played by a woman by the name of Takako Matsu. She worked with him on his 1988 film called April Story. She's a happily married mother of two. She's a librarian in Sendai, which is sort of north central Japan. Now, as the film opens, she's attending the funeral of her older sister Misaki in their quiet hometown, which is not that far away from the big city. I can't remember where it was. They do tell you on the screen, and I had never heard of it, but it's in the same prefecture, the same province as Sendai, so it's not that far away. Now, on the same day as the funeral, an invitation arrives from Misaki to attend her high school reunion. Now, interesting, if it's 2020, that would be the 28th anniversary of the class's graduation. So let's assume that this film is taking place in 2017. There's no indication of when the film is taking place, but I guess for the timeline to work, it would have to be 2017, so that it would be a 25th anniversary. Not that it really matters. But anyhow, Yuri decides to attend her sister's reunion so that she can let everybody know that her sister has died. Clearly she's never heard of email. Strangely, everyone at the reunion mistakes Yuri for Misaki, who doesn't even look like her, by the way, and Yuri can't bring herself to set the record straight. So when she leaves the event, former classmate Kiyoshiro Otosaka, who's played by Masaharu Fukuyama, Japanese actor, he follows Misaki and tries to renew his friendship with her. Now, it's clear to Yuri that Kiyoshiro was and still is in love with her sister, so she plays along hoping to learn more about Misaki, with whom she was estranged for many years. We don't know why she was estranged. Well, we find out later on in the film why, but we don't know at that point why she was estranged. The two begin texting each other, Yuri/Misaki and Kiyoshiro. But after Yuri's husband, Sojiro, who's played by Hideki Anno. Now, it's very interesting. Hideki Anno is a filmmaker as well. He's an animator, quite a famous guy. He directed Shin Godzilla and the Evangelion franchise. And interestingly, Hideki Anno had Shinjo Iwai in his own film called Shikijitsu back in 2000. So he's just, they're reciprocating now. So anyhow, Yuri's husband, Shojiro, finds out that the two of them have been texting each other, his wife and this guy, and Yuri has to resort to old-fashioned snail mail to continue her ruse. Now, Kiyoshiro, though, doesn't know where Misaki lives, so he sends his letters to her parents' house, where Misaki's teenage daughter, Ayumi, played by Suzu Hiroshi, finds them. Now, along with Yuri's teenage daughter, Soyoka, who's played by Nana Mori, who has decided to spend the summer with her cousin and grandparents. Ayumi, that's the daughter of the dead sister, she replies to Kiyoshiro as well, also posing as Misaki. Now, as Kiyoshiro pours his heart out to his high school flame, the film flashes back to 1992 when a young Kiyoshiro, played by 27-year-old actor Ryunosuke Kamiki, so he's a 27-year-old playing a 16-year-old, meets Misaki and her younger sister Yuri. So that's what the film's about. Now, there are basically three movies here. There's a farce because you have two people posing as somebody else. There's a family comedy, and I actually like that part, because there's a little boy involved and he's got some friends and they're cute. So I like that. And there's a tale of reminiscence and love lost. And Iwai alternates between the first two until he settles on the third one. And in the process, he introduces characters and then jettisons them almost as fast as they get introduced, as the short story shifts its focus to the events at the high school. And what we're left with is a typically soppy Japanese puppy love romance featuring cherubic adult actors playing teenagers. Now, the film's third act really goes off the rails when Kiyoshiro decides to pay a visit to Misaki's ex-husband, played by Etsushi Toyokawa, whose life after graduation turned out to be even less successful than Kiyoshiro's. Now, I don't get it. I mean, I don't understand why he made the same film twice. The story's whole conceit is just ridiculous. It's not just ridiculous, it's cruel. What these women did, Yuri and her niece, what they did was cruel. And yet Yoshiro is such a doormat, he doesn't seem to mind that he was made a fool of, not just by Yuri, but by Ayumi as well. And how did he not notice that the two women have different handwriting? He's getting letters from two women at the same time. They're not consistent because the two women don't know that each other one's writing, and the handwriting doesn't match, and yet he doesn't notice. Anyhow, but Iwai wants us to look past all that and shed a tear over what should have been or could have been. Let's put it that way. Sorry, Charlie, this film is not for me. This letter is going in the shredder. So I just did not buy into this at all. Did not like this film at all. Up to you if you want to see it. The film opened in Hong Kong yesterday. As far as I'm concerned, if you're desperate to go to the cinema and you'll see anything, go see it. If you're not, or you have some taste, don't see it. So that's called Last Letter, or in Japanese, Rastoreta. Okay. Here's a film. I'm going to talk about a film that you actually should see. And fortunately, it's on the streaming services, so you probably can see it. This is called First Cow. Now, actually, I read just the other day. Who was it? Was it CBS News? The reporter for CBS News, or either CBS News or Time. One of the publications rated this film as one of the best films so far this year. Interesting. Now, this is what the film's about. I guess I'll just tell you what the film's about. It starts out, it's late autumn, and a young woman played by Aaliyah Shawkat, people would know her from TV's Arrested Development, she's out walking her dog along a riverbank where an empty barge is slowly making its way upstream. 1 second. And it's a very extended shot watching this boat go, but you as you're watching, you're looking at your watch going, okay, come on, it's a boat, let's go. What the director wants you to do is slow down. And I think that was, in retrospect, I think that was a good choice. Now the woman's dog finds something under the fallen leaves. The woman pushes away the earth to reveal two skeletons lying side by side. The film then flashes back 200 years where Otis Cookie Figowitz, so his name is Otis, but everybody knows him as Cookie. He's played by John Magaro, who was in Overlord. He was in The Big Short. He was in Carol. I think Overlord, I recognize him from Overlord. I didn't recognize him from the other films. He's a quiet and unassuming cook who is traveling with a group of fur traders in Oregon Territory in the U.S. Now, one night, while on one of his foraging missions for mushrooms and whatnot in the forest, he comes across King Lu. Not King Lu, his name's King Lu, who's played by Hong Kong-born Orion Lee, who had small parts in Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and Skyfall, among other films. I don't think but he hasn't had a big part. This is probably the biggest part he's had so far. And he's a Chinese immigrant who's on the run from Russian trappers. Now, Cookie secretly brings Lou back to the camp to stay in his tent, and he puts him up for the night. Now, sometime later, in the morning, he goes off. Now, sometime later, the film moves forward. Cookie and Lou run into each other again, this time at Fort Tillicum, where Lou is now living. And Lou invites Cookie to stay at his shack, and the two men bond over their dreams and ambitions. And when the settlement's first cow arrives for Chief Factor, played by Toby Jones, people would know him from Atomic Blonde, the Hunger Games franchise, Captain America films. He's a wealthy Englishman, Chief Factor, and the two men have the idea to milk the cow in the dead of night and use the milk to produce oil cakes and sell these oil cakes for money. And in such a harsh environment, the soft and sweet deep-fried treats are an immediate hit with the trappers, and it earns the men a handsome sum of silver coins and scrip. But their success comes with a cost, and it isn't long before their version of the American dream brings some unwanted attention, as you could expect. Now, this is directed by a woman by the name of Kelly Reichardt. She's an indie filmmaker, and her thing is she makes these very simple, slow-burning films about everyday Americans. Typically set, she's done quite a few set in Oregon. So this is her shtick, so this film is right up her ass, right up her alley. Oh, right up her ass. What was that? Her debut film, called River of Grass, which was released in 2014, was nominated for a number of awards, and it landed on the Best Film of the Year lists of a few very influential publications. Now, I have to say, her minimalist style is not for everyone's taste, and some viewers might find this film a bit of a slog. It's slow, especially when, even more so, when the film's ending is revealed 5 minutes into the film. But the fact that we know or assume to know what's going to happen to Cookie and Lou, it doesn't matter. It's how they got there that's important. It's their journey along the way that's important. I always say this. I look after the cemetery, one of the cemeteries here in Hong Kong, the Jewish cemetery to be specific, and you look at headstones, not just in our cemetery, but cemeteries everywhere. You look at headstones, it just says born, died, and that's it. It doesn't tell you anything about their lives. And I say, you need to find out what the person's life is like to understand the person. It's not just, they were born and they died. There's a whole life there. And that, to me, that's what this film is all about. This is about their life. The fact that they died is irrelevant. Of course they died, but they died next to each other is irrelevant. Or we think that's them next to them. Now, I'll concede the film is not perfect. It has its problems. First of all, much of it is shot in very dim light, which can get annoying. Now, I understand it's supposed to be a time where light isn't ubiquitous, it's the 1820s, but there is a way to illuminate an outdoor set without losing the location's authenticity. So I was disappointed with that. Secondly, there are a couple of time gaps in the story that are head-scratching. All of a sudden the film jumps back 200 years, then it jumps, I don't know whether it's a week, a month, whatever, jumps ahead, and then it jumps ahead again. And, at first you're going, what happened? Go with it. It'll make sense in about a minute, just go with it. Third problem I have with the film is Lou's accent. Unless he's a cunning linguist, his English is too perfect, and his accent is too American. I didn't want him to sound like Charlie Chan. I didn't want him to have this stereotypical Chinese-American, movie accent. But I would have liked to have him screw up on a few verb conjugations or drop a few, ahs and thas once in a while. To me that was disappointing. Finally, and maybe this one's picking nits, these oil cakes are made with butter. So where did the guys get butter from? We don't see them churning the milk that they got to make butter, and the only person who would have had butter in Fort Tillicum would have been Chief Factor's wife. So unless they pinched it from her, which they didn't, I don't know where they got butter from. Anyway, so that's neither here nor there. Now on the plus side, First Cow has a very strong sense of place. You have Oregon is a character in this film. This is what it is. And you've got a bunch of ragtag characters who would seem very much at home in an episode of TV's Deadwood, or in the movie Deadwood. Now, one of them, who is only known in the credits as Man with Raven, he's played by the late Rene Auberjonois. People would remember him from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Boston Legal. This is one of his final screen appearances. He died last year, the year before. I can't remember when he passed away already. But I think there's still 2 more films coming out with him in it. This is one of his final ones. Now, I thought Magaro and Lee, they both put in really good performances, very assured. There's good chemistry between the 2 guys. I really like that. It wouldn't surprise me if their on-screen friendship has turned into an off-screen friendship as well. I honestly have no idea. Maybe they hate each other. But you know what? If they do hate each other, they faked it really good on this movie, because I thought their relationship in the film was very strong, and that was something that really pleased me. Now, in terms of Magaro, the actor, he's going to be in a new film. Not sure when it's coming out. It's about gangster Meyer Lansky, and it stars Harvey Keitel. So keep your eyes out for that one. Don't know, as I said, don't know when it's coming out. Now, First Cow was supposed to be released in the theaters. It actually was in the States very briefly in March. Then, because of the virus, it got pulled. Now it's on it went to some VOD platforms in July of this year. So now it's available as a rent or buy on Amazon.com and iTunes. I think it's about $4.99 to rent, and I don't know what to buy. I would say, you know what, if you can handle the film's pace, it's slow, I'd say check it out. I think it's a pretty good film for an indie, for a young filmmaker. I think, yeah, whether it's one of my best, top 10 films in 2020, what year is this, 2020? It might get in the top 10, I don't know. But certainly it's one of the better films I've seen this year. So that's called First Cow. I liked it. Go rent it. That's it for today. First Cow, Last Letter, your choice. Next week, I'll talk about Tenet. Have a good week. Have a good weekend. Please remember to wear your mask when you go out. And of course, wash your hands all the time. Social distance and all that. See ya.